And it's the 21st of October. Let's see how today goes. Plenty many things to discuss, of course. Yeah.
Hold up. 2 cartel guards enter the bridge. Keep your weapons concealed. Let's see if they split up.
That was Call of Duty on Twitter.
That the vast majority of the people that I've spoken to are saying that despite Partygate, despite the scandal after scandal, they would love to have Boris Johnson back as Prime Minister. And that is the mood that we have.
Hello, Fabian.
Hello again.
Are you hiding as well?
Yes. Top secret.
Top secret. Yeah, so I saw a little chatter in the Twitter, but don't expect that means anything. We'll see who comes in. I'm concerned that Peter doesn't feel like coming in. I think he got a bit gun shy after the VR headset discussion, which is not so good.
The VR headset, which one?
Hang on. Yeah, no, when we talked to him about you really need the headset to experience, I think he got a bit upset and pulled back, so he wasn't here on Monday. Oh, there he is.
Maybe not.
Okay. Note this up, delete initial part of conversation. That's not going to happen. Hey, Peter.
Good morning. What'd I miss?
Oh, I was just talking about you. I was just saying, I hope you're here today because I hope you weren't too annoyed at the whole, you got to get a headset discussion we had the other day. So I'm glad you're here. Headset or no headset, video or no video. And this button is about to fall off.
A nice jacket.
Thanks. Yeah, so I don't know how many people we'll have today, but I got a message from Andrea. I'll put it in our chat here. What headset have you got, Mark? Oh, headset.
No, I just updated the Oculus, which is, I thought I'll do this so it's actually on. It's been off for a while. I think my neck will be up to it.
Good.
But yes, and of course it said, I now need to do an update, so done.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear, Mark. Definitely. Yeah, this message from Andrea. Fabienne, you have her email address, right? Why don't you just, you two coordinate? We said for the demo day, something like 6 months away from the future of text, right? So when are you thinking about?
Wait, we're thinking between 6 months and what?
No, we were thinking something like 6 months away from the future of text to have this demo day.
Yeah, yeah.
So when were you thinking? Because let's just nail down a date.
Okay. 15th of March.
That's really late in the year. Really?
Well, so November, December, January, February, March. That's less than 6 months.
Yeah, it is. Okay. When is Easter? Mark, when is Easter celebrated here? Do you know?
I don't know, the Google will know. I mean, I don't have it instantly. Oh, wait a minute, it's probably scroll through the diary.
9th of April.
Yes, yeah. It's a movable feast in the literal sense.
In every sense of the words.
Well, that's where the term comes from.
Yes, I know.
Sorry.
No, that's cool. Okay, shall we say that 15th of April?
Sounds good.
Why do I say this? By the way, it's 6 months is because we need a bit of time to digest what everybody said, time to digest intellectually, but then eventually implement it. So right away is not possible. 1 year later is too late because there will be the next symposium, hopefully. So yeah, just throwing it out there. And before, I think 3 months, let's say Christmas and all that, there are only the crazy people in Germany at this big hacker conference that are between Christmas and the New Year because they are bloody atheists and all. But that's very, yeah, it's tricky to do. So and then January people come back, we merge. February there are quite a bit of events related to open source. I think nobody would be able to build something. So yeah, March seems, or I mean, at least slightly after the earliest after February, sound like something realistic.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. And also, I have this push now for us to do something for the 9th of December. And this, as we've discussed, the something could be a complete failure. It really doesn't matter as long as we're serious about trying to do something. Okay, maybe it's only us four. I'm going to share a screen. I have literally 120 seconds worth of presentation for you for clarification. You can see, right? Yeah, so I just wanted to make a point for clarity here. I'm not interested in reading in VR. I know that sounds very Brandl-ish about, oh, it's not about the technology, it's about the medium or whatever, the experience. But I do think right now, this is really, really important because Fabian earlier today, he sent me 2 ways of reading my article in VR. And it's kind of shit. I also then opened it in a web browser in Immersed. So it was my normal Mac, so I could control the screen. And Immersed is a lot better than I remember, by the way. The thing that bugs me now is I have my hands are visible in VR. I don't actually want them to be visible because I'm using a physical keyboard. It's a real distraction. But visible in itself is okay, but little lasers shooting off is just not useful because I can't do anything. Anyway, point is that from that particular experience, it was just too big. I mean, again, as Fabian and I talked about earlier, even a newspaper is not human scale. Newspapers need to be folded. You know, the old days on the train, people go flip, flap, flip, you know, it would be a skill. So I make two sets of assumptions, and if you don't agree with them, please do tell. Will AR, VR be textless? No. Will displays improve? Yes. And then here's the prototyping. Should we implement now to learn what currently makes sense and maybe learn something about underlying issues? Probably. Right, these are really the assumptions for now. I hope that's not a book you're reaching for, Mark. Oh, yeah, exactly. Interesting. Right. So further assumptions, and this is also really, really important. Doug used a CRT kind of a screen. You know, a lot of stuff happened on really bad displays. I'm an absolute visual snob. I'm so happy with my Retina, but I do remember the day that I saw it. I still used a computer the day before. So I do fully accept that right now, because obviously Vint is mad at me in the good sense, saying, why would anyone read in VR? Absolutely fine. But we're just making an assumption that quite soon it'll look better. So what are the other issues? So therefore, to remind you, I'm not interested in reading in VR. I'm interested in how reading can be presented on a truly human scale. And this is really, really important. What I mean by that is, as we do different reading activities, the scale of human reading changes. For instance, Peter is so interested in the library, and that is an important aspect of this. A library is big and all over the place, but reading a paragraph isn't useful in a billboard driving down the highway. So to be able to use the different scales and find out what makes sense is important. Because making something readable is not trivial, even in print. You can have 600 DPI printer or whatever it might be, still doesn't make it truly readable, as Bob and Jim has talked about a lot. There's a lot of other issues involved. So in closing, I want to build a magical book which fits human reading in AR primarily. By AR, what I mean, by the way, I don't care if there's pass-through or not. All I'm trying to say is it's the object that matters. The background is very secondary. So if you want to slap something against a real or virtual wall, doesn't matter, fine, slap it there. But, you know, for now, it's the book as an object. Initially, you know, human scale, like foldable origami, and then we can extend it further. Just to be also annoying, Peter and Mark, did you have a chance to read the PDF that I sent? Peter?
Not yet.
Okay, there's just some images I'll show you real quick. So what's going on here? This must be an old version. Okay, right. So this is really talking about book as artifact, not necessarily environment. And everything I'm saying with this, I'm not pretending to be right or anything. This is my perspective. And I really hope Adam will rejoin us because he has a different perspective. And I think that's useful. So this is for clarity, not to pretend I'm teaching you guys anything, right? So the idea here is, I think that a laptop, 16, 14 inch, whatever, is probably close to optimal reading when you're reading 2 pages of text, but it's a bit low down. So imagine in VR, if you have your actual monitor, you can stretch it like this to change the size. You can make it really tall if you want for table of contents and stuff. Or maybe you want to read 3 or 4 pages at the same time because it's the same thing. And here, this is where you open it up into further information, all these gestures. And this is a link here to how I've done it in VR. And what I get again and again by the VR demonstrations that I've done is, it's too big, it's too big, it's too big. You know, scale is amazingly useful, but I think we need a lot of practical experience to make the best out of it. And then there is, you know, the kind of things we can talk about is the timeline, graph, references, like we talked about many times. But then the very final bit, I really want to take a temperature check for you guys in the room, and that is, I think writing something down as part of a communication is really useful. I think if it's Twitter, they kind of own it and it goes into the ether. If we could have an environment where you write something and you email it or somehow give it to the group, they read it, but and then they can cite it. But the key thing, yeah, 1 second, Fabian, I just really want to check on this point. The key thing is when you read something in the community that has a citation, and you already have that document, clicking on the citation should open it from your local storage. I think that's absolutely crucial for the kind of work we're doing. You know, Fabian sent me some work last week, and even though it was a PDF, it's kind of a dead PDF in the sense that they all are. They're missing that part. Thanks for your thumbs up. Mark, I know where you are in this. Okay, yeah, Fabian, any questions on this, or should I stop sharing?
You can keep it open. It's a little bit on the like how can we exchange as a group? Either I don't want to go into formats, but more platform, and because you mentioned Twitter at some point. I'm thinking about how I can present this, but basically, I imagine that I rely on Twitter and I like it, not necessarily for Twitter itself, but for the conversation we're having. And the problem is, I imagine if you read the news that a certain Musk, like the richest man on earth or something, is going to not scrap it, but somehow destaff it. So I worry about this. Again, I don't really care for Twitter, but for the conversation we're going to lose. So that's where I make the connection with exactly what you said. And I just by, it's not a coincidence, but I mentioned this morning on Twitter that I would like to do a video about Mastodon, which is a technical alternative to it, but also a political one in the sense that we self-host, we federate. So we can imagine having a future of text Mastodon instance where all of us can join either directly with an account or federated. So I don't want to go about the detail, but it means also using protocols like ActivityPub and all that. It would mean potentially quite a bit of work, but in terms of being resilient for the community and including in other formats, reference all that, it's something we can consider.
I don't think we should consider. I think we should just do it. I think it's overdue. I have a server. We can use that. We can use your server, whatever. Maybe we use 2 servers so we get a bit of redundancy. I don't know how to set it up, but no question, let's do that. That's way overdue. Someone's pouring a lot of confetti out there. That's cool. Mark?
Actually, it's interesting. Fabian just said that. So I must say, I struggle to bring myself to Twitter now. The signal to noise ratio has got so poor, with everyone saying the world's going to hell in the handbasket, which is true, but I don't really need to know that via Twitter. I can read it in the news. And I'm sort of this close to just giving up on Twitter totally, because it's more effort than it's worth. But what I miss is, for instance, the really useful stuff that the likes of Fabian are putting out. But there is just no way to disintermediate them. And also drawing together what sort of both you just said, an interesting thing about this thing about sort of writing it down to make it citable is just that we do it with the expectation that we're doing it so it's available, not because we think someone's going to read it. The reason being that you never know in an open system when people have time. But the main thing is, as long as it's there and they can find it if needed, so you might have to point them to it, but if it's there, I think where some of the social media stuff just goes wrong, and all this sort of Slack and all this sort of garbage, is that it's fine for a small group who are very closely bonded, who are all reading the same thing. But what that forgets is that's removing attention to other things. Having a place where you can find what's pertinent to what you're doing and not their shopping list, where the granny died, and all these other things that people need to talk about, is actually crucially important. And it's a thing that most of these communication channels have just got fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
So probably things like the Mastodon sounds interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. By the way, just put the links in again here, and now that you updated your headset, Mark, please try them, at least a few of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to build something, and I don't actually know how to do it. And Fabian today very rudely asked me how long I've been spending reading in VR, and I had to answer very politely, not a lot, because I find it difficult to get content I want to read in there. And once you've read a block of text, how many times can you read it? Then you're no longer reading it; you're looking at it. So it's really, really difficult. We have to make some decisions. I mean, I think the four of us have agreed, and just to really be focused, and yes, Fabian, please, in a moment. First thing, in the VR environment, we will have a presentation of a 2-page spread book. That's going to be the basics. We may throw it away if we come up with some amazing thing, but that's the first thing. Once we have a mechanism for that to be there, great. Then maybe some of us work on how to actually hold it in the right way. But then when it comes to the other things, like the reference section, Les Carr, advisor at Southampton, he made the point that as an academic, the reference section is a first-class object in a document. It's not an appendix boring list at the back. He wants to interact with it in many rich ways. One of the things he built for me just for fun was a way to analyze a document to see where the citations are in the document and if they're repeated. You know, all kinds of stuff that an academic, either as teacher or a peer, needs. So if someone wants to work on that, maybe you, Peter, because that is actually quite flat initially. Of course, we can add a third dimension to it, but it is something that can be on a huge wall because it's a lot of stuff that's very, very different from the reading. So if we talk about a few views that we find interesting, we can decide who really focuses on them. And then we need to get this, how we move between them. I'm not talking about skeuomorphism as such, Mark. I don't think I've fallen down that, but what I'm saying is that what I am is creative. That I'm not organized like you. You know, you and me have many differences. That's supposed to be my thing. And as Fabian has been told many times, especially over the last week, I've been really depressed at my lack of creativity in this. It's been really to the point where I'm wondering, you know, should I just give up entirely and do something else? It is, when you're given almost infinite possibilities, like we have in VR world, you know, it's really bloody hard to think. So that's why I'm saying, let's just start with skeuomorphism, because for, you know, 4,500 years it took to develop the book. It's a bloody good object. You know, and then we do things out from that. If it turns out that we have an okay book in VR or AR, but then one of us has a light bulb moment, like, oh, hang on a second. The view that was actually for the map or timeline or whatever is actually better for reading this thing. Wonderful, we throw away the book. But if we get to the 9th of December and we have absolutely nothing, that scares me. Because we have the brains to put something, even if it is a Hubs PDF, and you walk and you read around the room, even if it's horrible, we got up something. Fabian?
We're going to have something maybe horrible, but we're going to have something. I'll try to.
Hang on, while Fabian is putting on and getting ready to speak, I just wanted to, since Bob just came in, Fabian, you're going to have to do the mic thing because of the Hubs thing. One thing that has been our greatest success, I think, in VR is the murals, because that is one thing that clearly works at scale. So I have ignored it in the current writings that I've done because I think it's obviously useful. But, you know, we need to do things like, anyway, Fabian, I can tell by your face you're ready for me to shut up.
Well, we're getting to that point. That's great. So let me know, please, when you can see my screen.
Oh, no. Okay, that's better.
You can see?
Yep.
Okay. So I can either use my hands or the controllers. I'll take the controller because I find them more precise, so to show a bit. But that's the PDF that you've been asked to read yesterday or a couple of days ago. And I just want to show that it works in VR like today. limited, of course, but I just want to show that it's not like a theoretical idea that might happen for the 9th of December or something like this. And I read it, like half of it at least, in the headset. And I don't know if you can see from the webcam, but I'm on my office chair, and I won't do the whole thing because otherwise you'll sit inside of my nose. But I'm pretty relaxed. It's a reclined chair, so I can read. I prefer this position, but if somebody wants to be straight or even on the floor, that works just the same. And I can scroll like so with the joystick, and I can move it like this, or translate it, or bring it closer, and bring the whole interface. And I can also have another window here. Again, this is just a browser. There is nothing extra or something. And so it means I can have another tab. And it means if I can select text. That's a bit much, but anyway. And I can copy it. I can edit there. Well, I'll have to input that password again, but that's okay. And paste it. I'll select again. I can type as per usual, and I can paste it. I think it's at the bottom that I added it.
Fabian, as far as the typing is concerned, even in the browser, you can, of course, use a physical keyboard, right?
Right. Yes, you can use a physical keyboard, but the typing is not really my point. It works. And it works with a proper keyboard. And whatever people have being Bluetooth or even plugging it right there in the headset. But the point being that PDF can be read, and the quality, honestly, it's pretty good. And if it's not, you can also resize it, zoom there, reshape also, not just resize, but having like more vertical. It's not just the size. So there are, and you can add another tab also. If I do this and then drag it here. So it's limited, but I would argue it's usable today. And if I was in the train or somewhere there and I might have my ebook reader, but I would prefer to forget the actual environment, I would do this. I can also, just for the sake of showing this, have it in AR, so that if I prefer to see my environment, like you guys, with the document there, I can also do that. It's working out of the box, let's say.
So this is phenomenally interesting. You pointed out what is probably obvious to you, but it was well worth it. Should we consider doing not necessarily VR web, but maybe just a plain web solution that uses several screens and make that an amazing thing in VR if we have a specific screen setup?
I think it's shallow. We can definitely do this, and it's a good starting point. But I would tend to think then we stick to having very big screens. It's as a starting point, and maybe to get people comfortable and show the power of the browser. Why not? But I think I would argue it's not enough. Like I want to put things are in space, but they are basically on a curved plane, and I think that's really underusing. Let's say having an actual room like so, or mapping it so.
There's no harm in showing the shallow stuff, if only to make the point to those who like a visual example that you probably think that when you said you wanted something, this is what you think you wanted, and actually it is for the, because sometimes just seeing that, because as you absolutely right say, it's a shallow thing, but funnily enough, being able to show that actually might be quite useful, because to just say it allows someone to say, well, the picture in my mind is not like that at all. And it probably is, but the picture in one's mind, unless you've had a reasonable time in the sort of technology, whatever it is, often it is very sharp, but is completely incorrect. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting that we invest vast amounts of time in it, but certainly if it's possible and simple to do, having it there as a sort of thing of saying, look, here's one really bad one I made earlier, because this is not what we're trying to make, so that you can almost fence that off, and I think it makes the other more relevant.
This is so bizarre, by the way. I am now in the room with you guys, but obviously I look pretty stupid. But you look fantastic. Huge.
Do I have legs though?
Yeah, if I had a 3D camera.
It's an existential problem.
But already, because I'm immersed, I have these annoying lasers. They have absolutely no use other than for changing the location of the window. I tap and nothing happens, right? So
Very 1980s, lasers with everything.
lasers with everything, yeah. I just want
a quick thought, just to sort of pardon what we're saying at the moment. My point about skeuomorphism, I really wasn't just being rude. What I was thinking about is, so for instance, a really interesting thing is think about things like a 2-page spread, because in some things, case in point, I've been actually revisiting this a bit recently. I absolutely would like to read that as a 2-page spread, because actually that's how it was designed to be read. And indeed, what I'd really like to be able to do is exactly the sort of book where I'd actually like to be able to see it as a visual array of 2-page tiles and move in and out, which is innately going towards the hypertextualism that's in the book. But elsewhere, actually, no, I just want the text to reflow. I actually want it to be a comfortable size, and I really, in many cases, do not care about the original print format. I accept that often you have to live within it, because often that's the only way you can actually get the text, because it arrives packaged in a way that doesn't allow it to reflow. But nonetheless, from a design perspective, I don't think the canonical source is a book style 2-page display, simply because I think it's overly venerating a past medium in a way that stops us thinking ahead. It's a useful display thing, and certainly one that I'd use, but I wouldn't put it more strongly than that.
Well, I disagree with half of what you said on that point, because when it's in multiple columns like that, it's a published thing. And when someone, as you know better than anybody, so I'm going to go out of there. I just did an interesting test that I'll tell you about in a second. When you publish in a journal, you, the author, you're responsible for the layout. So that means that if a heading is trailing at the bottom of one page, you have to rejig things so it's nicely at the top of the next page, that kind of stuff. So it's actually, when done right, it is actually optimized for reading the thing here on this page and the thing here on that page. So what I mean is, in terms of when it's done right, readability of a spread is a thought through thing for a unit. So that's why, of course, there are some text that you would.
But then you're showing an artifact. The nuance I'm getting at is that,
but that is what
there's don't go lost in the weeds, but it's important, is that if we're talking about viewing a text, if the text is only available to us in a highly formatted, effectively paper paginated form, then it's entirely sensible to use that, because it's more trouble than it's worth to try and deconstruct it and recompile it. But that's not how I increasingly expect things to go. That's how the legacy stuff is. But I don't want the legacy to bend me out of shape into more sensible ways that I can use things. So, just for instance, as a little provocation, let's take on board some of the ideas that we, as a provocation. So the ideas that, for instance, Paul's been mentioning in terms about how we use more headlining. I'd be much more interested to see that as almost a default thing, saying that it's a real shame all this old stuff just can't be done like that, or maybe it's so good you actually want to spend time to rewrite it so it works in this paradigm that allows us to move more easily and navigate around. The two can coexist. I'm simply aware that much as I like books, they keep sort of guiding my sense of what we can do. Mainly because I'm always surprised at just how trapped a lot of the text is, even in digital format. It's actually really, really hard to do much with it without a lot of effort.
Okay, now hang on. Those are two separate issues, and it's very important that they're two separate issues, to do much with it, absolutely. Now, this is, as you all know, Author. So what I did, I went and opened Author while I was in the headset with you guys. And I made the text really, really small just to see what happened in the headset. And it scales really well, because it seems like it's sending it as type information, so to speak, rather than pixels. So I could have a really big display automatically now without even thinking about it. So that absolutely goes towards what you're saying. And we can fold it and all of that stuff. So depending on where you are, whether you're reading, writing, and what you're reading, in many cases, I completely agree with you, Mark. But I also think that in some cases, to describe something really well, it's not just the choice of the font or the bolding versus non-bolding. The layout is really important too. And it's like a newspaper, right? So but the thing is, a lot of people just don't do it well, like any media. There's the 90% rule, right? I forget what it's called now. Only 10% of the stuff is good. Our job is to try to make these things available, make it possible. Yeah, anyway, Peter, your hand must be getting tired, even though it's virtual.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone's tried.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone's tried extending typesetting algorithms into 3D. And my other thought was, in terms of enhancing the book, it might be interesting to think along GIS system lines of having different layers. Now, imagine like you're looking at your book and you pick up a book in real life in a used bookstore. You might have 5 different color highlights on the pages and notes scrolled in the margins all over the place, making the original text almost unreadable. Now, imagine if we had that same text with layer information associated with each annotation on the page, maybe 5 or 7 layers. When you open the book in VR, you could get a list of possible layers appearing on a little palette just to the side of the book. You could select which layers you want to see, and you could grab an annotation on the page and drag that out off the book, and you'd get, imagine it's like a little duplicate copy of the book, only the text would be Greeked out, and all you'd get would be a representation of the layer, and you could push that back maybe an arm's length behind the book that you're reading, so it becomes small. And then you get a live update on that as you're turning pages, so that you know that there's information in these different layers. And if you were interested in that information, then you could point your laser beam finger at the representation of that layer, and that layer would then manifest on the page that you're actually reading.
Peter, you're going to hate me, but this comes under the category of please try the headset. Because it's such a different feeling. When you talk about these levels, one of the first surprises I had in VR was I had a line connecting like a Ted Nelson laser line. It was super annoying. So doing the 3D levels is really hard, but really important. But yes, I mean, please write those ideas down. Do not lose them. They are very valuable in the longer run. And then, yeah, Bob.
I want to go back to what Mark was saying. What I heard was that he has an intuition that long scroll text that we make into books now, into pages and books, are a legacy, a huge, enormous legacy built into the neurons of hundreds of millions, if not several billion people around. So that kind of legacy is going to be around. But as what I thought I heard him saying was that in the future, or as emerging now, some other kind of units are useful and important. I just want to say that I'm finding that also. I'm finding that Mark, the double page spreads that I put in Mapping Hypertext, which was an experiment at the time. I'm not, other people had done double page spread, but they hadn't done it consistently with the name or the actual description, the actual statement of the concept as a title, consistently on every single double page spread, every single one. What I find now is that in the conversations that I have, I will not say go to my book. I will grab the 2-page spread to communicate with. And I may have done it with you, Mark, and maybe with others. Because it generally brings both the name and title and the explicit statement of the concept plus examples together and acts them as a unit. And I find myself having done that a few months ago, the latest book, which has been interrupted by all sorts of things, my book on social messes and wicked problems, I have now sorted that all into double-page. I mean, it was written in double-page spreads, but I now have it in a way I can send you single double-page spreads of the concepts that are in there, because those are what come up in my conversations like this with people on Zoom.
But funnily enough, I mean, I think of them in my mind's eye looking at this book. I think of the double-page spreads as if they were a page, and I interact with it slightly in terms of being a picture book, and I don't mean that in a real sense, but yeah. I'm not trying to read the page. I'm not interacting with it as a couple of columns of linear text or something. I'm scanning around far more, and that's why, for instance, it's the sort of thing that excites me to take into something like an AR environment. Because, for instance, it's exactly the sort of book where I'd like to actually see where actually thumbnails of all the pages would actually be relevant. Because one thing I've been scratching my head about was, being talked about, well, we could explode the document. But if I think of the future of text, because they're nearly all linear unless I've read the book a lot and know what the pages look like, actually just seeing the first page tells me nothing. The display that I see tells me nothing. And that's, again, that's not to discredit it, but I'm just wondering, how we mine something out there. So we pull this apart, which is why I made reference to your point about headings and things, because it's probably pulling that and sort of turning that into, as it were, thumbnail that may be more useful. Now, obviously, we can't do it for legacy material, especially stuff that's sort of trapped in formats that are too expensive to rework. Just trying to keep sort of those two things apart, because I absolutely think there's lots of good stuff, and there's no point in throwing all we've societally learned about the book out of the window, and I wouldn't want that. But I'm just trying to make sure I don't hold on too tightly to the past, and therefore don't.
And I'd like to add one other experience. Before I was in this smaller office space, I used to have a one-bedroom apartment for an office and studio. And in the back room, I just had somebody has taken them all. I had 89 printouts of different sizes of murals, 89 of them. And I found during that time when I had that studio, in conversations like particularly during COVID, I could grab one of those. I mean, literally in 3 dimensions, and say, this is what I'm talking about. It's right here. Now, I know you're not going to read it right now. I can send it to you. You can download it or whatever. But it was extremely handy to be able to do that with, and these were much larger than 2-page spreads, by the way. They were the information mural sort of size or infographic size of units of communication. I think of them as units of communication that we need to articulate better over the next 20 years.
Bob and Mark, have you had a chance to look at some of the VR experiences that I put up on the web?
One you sent yesterday, I looked at. I thought the idea of using the hands for moving the book around, book pages around, that would be useful on the mural. on murals and other infographic things as well. Yes.
Yeah, so.
Is that what you're asking about? I
No,
don't know
no.
if that's what you're asking.
No, no, I mean the one earlier in the week with the VR experiences, the webpage. I put it in the chat again here because I think we're at a place or a stage where we really need to decide what to build and not just because we need to do a test after the 9th of December. We can re-question the universe, but some of the things you mentioned, Mark, about the question of seeing what's in the book in this way or that way. Fabian mentioned it on Monday, so I mocked it up so you can actually try it. And I find it surprisingly not useful, but it was a useful experiment. By the way, Fabian, I know you haven't looked at it because there is an Easter egg in there for you, only for you in one of them. So you're gonna have to go through all of them because it's something only you will understand. So there, that was very clever of me. But
Well, yeah.
no, I just mean
I'm
that.
not working on your deadline, you know.
No, I know, Bob, but I know.
I don't know if other people are as well or not. Are
Okay.
they?
Yes, we have an agreement. We're going to launch the book on the 9th of December. That is agreed. And we're going to try to have some aspect of the book in VR so that we are not only talking about it, we're actually doing something about it. And if it turns out to be a car crash, that's fine, as long as we learn something and we can explain what we learned. It's not going to necessarily be the whole book. It's not necessarily going to be reading everything. But I really desperately think we need that experience. And Fabian has been pushing a lot on the whole prototyping thing. So that's why I've been doing the cardboard and doing it in VR. And the presentation that I did today, actually, I'll go because Bob and Brandel just joined. It's very few slides. Just want to make the really simple point that I'm not actually interested in the issue of reading in VR at all. I find it quite irrelevant. I make two sets of assumptions, which so far I think the community agrees with. VR, AR will not be textless. Displays will improve. And we should implement now to learn current limitations and reality and learn more about underlying issues. And also, remember, a lot of stuff was done on CRTs, not Retina beautiful. So we got to build with what we have to get to a stage. So to go back to the not interested in reading in VR, it's a very Brandel, as far as I understand you, Brandel, a very Brandel thing to say, because it's not about the specific headset. It is about the capabilities that can be enabled. So I'm interested in reading at a truly human scale, because one of the things of mocking this up in VR is that big things should remain big, small things should remain small. And it's turning out to be really important. A lot of stuff that in VR can be almost infinite large or just massive, it's useless. Who would want to read a book on a billboard in reality? That kind of stuff. So to learn how to use VR doesn't mean only how to go big, it means go the appropriate scale. And that requires experience. So to make something readable is not even trivial in print. So final slide here. What I'm thinking about now is a magical book that really fits human scale. It doesn't, even though it's VR, it can be, virtually speaking, just this big. But depending on what we do with it, we can expand it and do all kinds of dimensional things. But the initial artifact it is something like that. And I'm bringing
And so one of the things that is implicit in what you just showed us, which I understand a little more, is that the unit is the book, the unit of communication. And what Mark and I were just saying was maybe the unit of communication is something that you can grab and is that sort of a thing, which is put together by maybe what our Brazilian friend, is his name Nepo, was trying to put together.
Raphael, yeah.
Which was a set of what he called cards, but it seemed to me that the cards were expandable in all sorts of ways. That, in fact, he could put film into his card. So it was something that and then you could organize the cards. That is, organize those units of communication, but they were distinct and they could be named, and they could, and the major concepts could be put at the top of them so that one could manage them easier. So
Yeah.
I'm interested in how we would put that sort of thing into VR, not just text and just not just for reading, because reading, as Bjorn said the other day, is 4 or 5 different kinds of things, and we keep reducing it to reading. It's not just reading, it's exploring, navigate, it's all those, managing all of those other things.
Okay, we have to kind of make some decisions as a group here, because of course, text is used for reading, annotation, sharing, learning, connecting. Of course, there are many attributes. Of course, there are many aspects, but we have to. Yeah, okay. I don't know what to say anymore, because I've been part of so many of these communities over the years, mostly under the Doug Engelbart umbrella, and there will always be comments of "what about?" And many of them will be going wide, some of them will be going deep. But at a certain point, through real artistship. Come on, Brandel. I saw your memory bit.
What was the last I didn't understand the last sentence you said.
Real artistship. You got to make something, right? It's a Steve Jobs quote. It's what Steve Jobs said to the Macintosh people, okay? Again and again, right? So I'm just asking for the 9th of December. The entire history of humanity after that is entirely up for discussion. But for the 9th of December, we have a book. It's currently in author format, which is almost like Word. It's an RTF thing with JSON, right? Can't we just provide a reading experience? Can't we forget about annotations? Can't we forget about HTML? Can't we forget about all that stuff for a couple of weeks? You know, there's still so much that can be done. One of the things is the pictures from the physical event we had here. You know, I made it into a physical book as a test. And we also have it as a PDF. I'd like to put that at the end of the book, and it'd be nice to see them big. It'd be nice to have murals in there, especially the ones you've already made, Bob. But it's just, we keep switching. We got to also focus down, you know?
You can put, I can give you 80, I can give you 100 murals if you want them. I can start shipping them today.
Okay, but are they about the future of text?
No.
So why do you want them in the book?
They are examples of currently used futuristic examples of how text would be used for other problems than the future of text.
Yeah, they are future texts.
But Bob, you have
murals. They are the future of text, yes.
Bob, you have articles, you have murals in your articles, which is great, right? So one of the questions I would like us to address is, you read Bob's article, there's a mural, which is an image. How can you then suddenly get into something like what Brandel built to view an image? Because it may be great for a mural, but maybe it's also great for a photograph. Maybe it's also great for a graph, right? These are real issues that I think can really change what it is. I mean, imagine, Vint Cerf was a huge supporter of our community, but also a huge skeptic. Imagine him finally putting on the headset again, seeing a small PDF book in VR saying, this is a bit rubbish. And then anyway, we force him to go through it. It gets to your page, Bob. There's a mural, and through something we haven't invented yet, he can tap it or whatever it might be, and boom, he has the whole mural. That's amazing. Those are the kind of excursions we can make. So there's no question about that, Bob. That is a real core part of this. But we need to kind of keep narrowing down on, we have this artifact, it is a book. How do we make these other amazing things happen?
Yeah. So, Mark, you have your hand up, but I can tell you more about where I've been going.
Yeah, do you kind of one interjection, because I want to hear what you
Yeah.
have to say, and that's just to say that I hear that. I also think that actually we could usefully use not necessarily all, but a good number of spreads of mapping hypertext, because one of my concerns is the book, for all that's in it, is perhaps not the best thing to demonstrate what we're trying to do, and I think that's one of there's something thing is that's not a canard against the book. That's a practical problem I think we're having. Is that some of the really interesting things we're doing aren't best shown or best sort of teased apart used in the book. But I want to hear what Brandon has to say.
So in general, you know, as Frode mentioned that Björn said, reading is lots of different stuff. Reading is very different sort of categories of activity. Something that was really relieving for me to learn was when it was either Matuszek or Nielsen mentioned just how long it takes them to read a paper. And they weren't even talking about something as long as this, which is 9,000 words. What do prototypes prototype? I printed out a paper copy of it just in order to be able to think about and compare it. What I've been realizing with what a prototype, which is a chapter in a book actually, is that it's incredibly compressed. You know, that there's this job that somebody has done of stuffing an incredible amount of information, material, some illustrations into this just absolutely abominable format of a 2-column spread with illustrations always at the top or bottom of each column. It's just like, what the hell, guys? Like, you could have put it anywhere. You could have put it at the relevant point in the column. And just like, it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so you know what I've been doing with that is building that page that has the I'll pull it up because it's got more in it now. Share. And I'll share what are prototypes. Optimize. There we go. Okay. So this is the state of the page. Largely the same, but a little bit more. So one thing I've gotten more nuance on. So this is this paper. What do prototypes prototype? It like I said, it covers 15 examples of prototypes, or 15 examples of things that people call prototypes. And it tells you about them. Bob, I think you probably weren't here last time I showed it, but one thing that is happening here is that the titles are all sticky.
Yep.
So that means that they stick. So you see what the prototypes prototype at all times. You see right now that we're in the introduction. We're now in the problem with prototypes, and now we see that we're in the subsection, what is a prototype inside that? And then if you get to a 4 level, yeah, you actually have all 4 of them there. So we can see that we're in goal of the model. Another thing that happens is when you scroll in, as the model is introduced, it's this object here. It's in the book, obviously, it's a black and white image of a triangle, but here it's a real rotatable thing. The reason for that is that it has these axes on it, and it can be easier or harder to read the different pieces of it. And as you continue past it, it sticks up at the top of the page so that you have it available as a sort of independent finding device rather than having to have images of it constantly kind of added. And each of the examples are located on these axes of role, look and feel, and implementation. And all of the illustrations stick at the side of the page next to the relevant body of information. In this section in particular, because the point is to contrast all 3 of these examples, they stay up at the same time so that you can read them. And you can look at them and sort of compare their qualities. But yeah, as you continue on, now we're focusing on role prototypes. So the role label is the only one that remains. And now these, they're still there, but they're grayed out so that you can see that that's no longer the point of emphasis. Another big thing that I've been thinking about is just the fact that reading text, like with your eyes, isn't phenomenal in virtual reality. So you may not be able to hear this, but when I click on these now, what happened is this text is being grayed, and this word here, the colors are relatively subtle, but it's red, and that's because it is reading this out to me as I look at it. I can play and pause, and it's saying it was more efficient. The more efficient to wait on the results of independent investigations in the key areas of role, and I find that relevant and valid because I think that multimodal reading is good and valuable, and not enough attention is paid to that multimodality of things. It turns out that there are some fairly popular browser plugins for just using the native the text-to-speech to be able to kind of read those things out, and I think that there's a lot to that. It's not phenomenal when people just speak their slides, but I think that there's a lot to seeing text that's complementary to what you're actually hearing from somebody's dialogue at the same time. So that's what I've been doing there. And then I'll pull up, I need to stop sharing. Do you want to jump in, Fabiano, or do you mind if I get to the next bit?
No, go for it. Except the tiny jump in is I'm still waiting for the link so that I can read it your way.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
me
so
too.
sorry. Yes,
I want to see. I want to read that paper, and I'd much rather read it than something about the future of text. As
well, so and to that end, Frode.
Bob,
Yeah, to that end,
hang on a second. Bob, why do you say such insulting things? It takes a lot of energy.
It's not an insult. It's a comment because one of the problems of using your subject matter as the example is confusing to the reader, particularly the initial reader.
Yeah, there's a meta aspect of it where it's challenging to see the relevance of it until you find a real subject matter. That's why I landed on this what a prototype's prototype is, because I felt like it was a dense enough text that it was necessary to think about what could be done to improve it. And I think to Bjorn's point via Bob, it's essential to go, what is the text, what are the problems, and what are the goals, and how can we tell when we've succeeded in improving it? And I think that I'm actually, on reflection, even a bit sheepish about choosing what a prototype simply for the sheer meta aspect of it, because I'm building prototypes about what a prototype, and that's funny, but it means that people can get a little bit tangled in what about this is the experiment and what about this is the subject,
Yes.
And so but to that end, one of the things I'm interested in is plugging other papers. I think what I've been thinking about generally is sort of a paper reader, something that's a little bit easier to follow those things. But yeah, I'm interested in how well what these things I'm doing here will translate into other sort of subjects. So the other aspect of it is what would be truly beneficial for a spatial kind of demonstration. These are the 15 examples. So these are the first in that first section showing the ones on the 3 axes. So this is role, this is look and feel, and this is implementation. So I haven't gone as far as to build a working prototype on this computer, but I could do that if necessary. But this is one of the things that I thought was valuable, was to understand that this was to be implemented on a Macintosh 2CX, Macintosh 2FX, and so I made it look enough like a Mac 2FX that you can kind of understand that. And then here are all of the role prototypes. And you can see here, this is an initially paper prototype where I'm trying to make sure that you can understand the paperness of it. This is these are the Post-it notes. In the paper, there are sort of black and white representations of those Post-it notes. But I feel like that distracts from the fact that if you understand these as tangibly Post-its, then that's valuable. This is the Knowledge Navigator. I'm really excited about seeing if I can find more about what the Knowledge Navigator is in terms of the room and the shape and the color of the plastic and stuff. This is the integrated communicator. These are purely physical artifacts. They didn't do anything, but I think that it's relevant to be able to kind of look at these, pick them up and play with them and understand what it might do to see those. Yeah, it continues on. So this is a pizza box. There's conjecture in the paper about whether a pizza box can be a prototype. It occurs to me that the example is that it's a pizza box that is appropriately weighted to how heavy they think a computer would have been, and to give it to an architect to carry it around for a day. So in fact, actually a pizza box isn't adequate. What you would want is a person carrying a pizza box, maybe a montage of film of somebody doing that. But one of the things that has sort of got me to thinking is, what is the best way of explaining a paper like this? It would be the author or experts who are adequately versed in the subject matter of it actually going through and explaining these things to you. But one of the things that could really be elevated is having these props. You know, if there was an instructor, much like unfortunately you weren't there, Bob, but at the Linnaean Society, actually the table there, when the expert, her name escapes me, sort of showed us those pieces. I think it was just an incredible sort of instruction and exploration of all of those things. And so, you know, there was Benedict Evans was recently extremely critical of what possible benefit of understanding the historical geopolitics there could be in watching John Wilkes Booth assassinate Abraham Lincoln in the theater. And I take to that point, it doesn't tell you much about the geopolitics of the post-Civil War nation, but it would tell you a lot about the interior decoration of the theater, at least. You know, you got to pick your battles, but I think that there would be things that you could learn about the nature of the country from being immersed in these things. And so, yeah, having these props, having these objects, I think is really, really interesting. I hope it's not just sort of gee whiz. Yeah, my goal has been like, what is better? What makes these things more memorable, and how can you sort of imprint that piece of information with these artifacts in a way that sort of brings it all together? And what can we learn more generally from really trying this on that particular artifact? And one of the things that, yeah, like for reading, for me, it's not so much that VR can improve reading, but that VR can improve your grasp of what it is that you're reading. That there's nothing truly virtual reality about the text, about the sort of the act of reading, but more about what it is you're reading about, the world it's situated in, what to remember about where that is. And so I'm really heartened by what you're saying, Bob, about the role of the illustration and the role of those sort of singular double page spreads. I think is really interesting in a context where we need these kind of various scales of reference to kind of go back and forth and think about what we're remembering, think about and share and have something that's mutually recognizable. I think those are all really essential components that the text per se, and in particular sort of academic or denser texts absolutely fail just the most basic sniff test of, is this something that I'm going to be able to kind of parse and distinguish at this level of detail? Are these things that I'm going to be able to remember? And I think no, by no means. And so we need to come up with something better.
Well, we can do this. You know, this is very inspiring piece. It's the most inspiring thing I've seen in the last few weeks, because we can do this with the combination of arrows and three-dimensional arrows going in all sorts of floaty directions with images, three-dimensional images and so forth in geopolitics. And I have at least one example I'll send you that you may want to start trying with. I mean, it was done 15 years ago, but that was as far as I could go at the time. But I could see it becoming three-dimensional in the way that you're showing. And
Okay.
and then you can grab those things and you can put them elsewhere, and you can twist the arrows around as forces happening in geopolitics.
Okay.
That's very exciting.
Okay. All right, guys. Sorry, seriously. We'll have to change theme a little bit, because I did ask if we could have some time to discuss our book in VR for the 9th of December.
Okay, so
No, but hang on, Brandel, hang on 1 second. I'm so tired of fighting that it's going to be fucking arrows in 3D, etc. I'm tired of this, guys, okay? I've devoted 11 years to this. All I'm saying,
understand.
can we do just for a couple of weeks, one prototype for one, oh, it's got to be geopolitics. Oh, it's got to be 3D model of a computer. Okay, I love you guys. I'm sorry that I'm getting a bit stressed, okay? But it's just becoming talk, talk, talk. A lot of talk,
Do you? Okay, so sure, sorry. So Frode, do I have the text of the book? I thought I did, but I think I maybe don't.
Yes, I have. I've sent you a link to the text. Brandel, it's not really the point. The point is, you guys are all here out of your own free time, out of your own free will. If you don't want to do the things that I want to do, if you want to do something different, that is absolutely okay, right? The future of text, there are many ways forward for the future of text, but I built almost 10 experiences for virtual reality just to test overviews and placements. Nobody looked at it, not a single person, right? I mean, Brandel and Fabian, you guys are very advanced, you know these things. So on one side, you have so much experience, you don't need to, fair enough. And on the other side, Mark, Bob, and Peter, for different reasons, don't go in. If we want to have a discussion on what the future of text should be, if we get rid of all that pesky text, which is what it so often goes towards, that is another discussion, right? But it's just so I don't have the actual blood pumping heart for this. Okay, people wrote articles. They didn't make murals. They didn't make 3D models of 2FXs, which was the first computer that I really fell in love with. These are all really valuable things, but we have one artifact now. It's not interested to discuss it. We should change that.
No, I'm super interested. So I've just been trying to find. Is this the volume? Monday, September 19. Oh, okay. So this is the author document. I've been struggling to find the actual document as one of the things. I found it though. Good. I think that in line with what I've been doing with this what a prototype's prototype, what I would want to do is go through some subset of the document. So I did find it. It wasn't labeled volume 3. It was just called author doc. Was the email that had the author document, but of Future of Text volume 3. That was on the 19th of September. So there might be a more up-to-date version. It would be lovely to have a copy of that to be able to kind of peruse and think about what I would do with it. My first thought is, I think that it would be really valuable to go, what do I want out of this document? And that's where I constantly pause on this, like reading in VR is like, yes, why? Why do I do this? What is valuable about it? What can be improved? And that's why I wanted to pursue this. What the prototype document as a case study is to say, what is a good, what is important? Like, it's kind of understood to be an important document, hallowed even for a certain sort of set of the community, and so it's a valuable enough sort of point of reference to start sort of pulling out and elevating and turning into something really important. I think that there should be things that can be learned from it as that goes into Future Text Volume 3. Sticky titles obviously is one thing, but if there are finding devices, I love that from Too Much to Know. We recently got a copy for everybody who's been sort of mentioning that. I think it's been a thrilling read so far. Like what are the functions? What are the purposes of reading this, and how can they be improved? And I look forward to doing that to the book as well. And sort of getting one of the first things that I did with this what a prototypes document was array all of the pages and then try to characterize and categorize what it was that they each were, and think about the sort of the relative mass of things, whether there was something beneficial to being able to color or locate them in space as I arrayed them around me, and that's what I will do with volume 3 as well. So yeah, like whatever the most up-to-date version you have would be amazing. And we can take a look, because yeah, it occurs to me 19th of September, that's actually before the symposium. So yeah, if there's something more up to date, I actually have searched on them multiple occasions and failed to come up with it. But yeah, that's how I'll play with it, and that's how I'll start. And I look forward to it. You know, my playing with what are prototypes, it was by no means like a contempt for or disinterest in pursuing that same kind of approach. I will say, you know, one of my goals is not to make a singular reading experience, but to explore avenues in which reading might be improved, or sort of comprehension more broadly might be improved by presenting aspects and dimensions of this in space. And so it's not necessarily my goal to put all of the words in there, but to put something that represents something that means that understanding can be improved. And that might actually still be arrows for future of text, to be honest. Like if it's to do with creating a cross-linked sort of set of references around the way that people sort of broach certain subjects, if it might be, you know, categorization of people based on readability scores, you know, term frequency, inverse document frequency of various things, to be able to say these articles sort of appear more related to each other than those, then I think those should all be fair game and up for grabs as representations, to be able to kind of lead into that central sort of task of actually understanding, if not reading the book.
All of that makes sense, Brandel, and the work that you're doing on the prototype, of course, prototype is of course very valuable work. But the stress that I have is, even when you come with a sentence like doing the last thing you said now about word frequencies and all of that stuff, it's got to appear somewhere, right? And I remember my professor, Ed Leahy from Syracuse, who was really annoyed at me often because I was the one waffling. And I'm not saying you're waffling, but I really was. This, that, and the other. It's like, we were pitching once, because I was studying advertising, working for him. We're pitching to get one of the biggest health companies in America. I don't even know what kind of company it was. And I was trying to get the right kind of blue background. And he just said, just pick one, right? And there are a few things here. We just got to pick some, right? Because when you're talking about word frequency, where are we going to show it? It's going to be floating in space. It's going to be on a wall. It's going to be on the book. It's going to be on the side. You know, these things are really... they are the realities, right? They're where the rubber hits the road. Otherwise, we can talk about it a lot. So it's really, really nice to see the things you build for that reason. You know, I just want like a starting table or something for the book. Anyway, Fabian and Mark, you've had your hands up a long time.
I did, which sadly made me pile up 10 different tabs.
Sorry.
So I'll show something pragmatic to look back to the book, and then I'll step back just a bit, but I'll justify why. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yep, it's working.
Thank you. So this is as 2D as it can get and text as it can get. It's just a test. But the point being that I'm using something called WebDAV, which is how to share files on the web. And when I say files, I say the directory itself, not just one file is here with a link, another is there. Why does it matter is because I think the book itself can be the PDF, but it can also be the videos recording and any content that goes with it. I don't think that PDF itself is necessarily sufficient, and I don't think it's really sufficient for having a proper VR experience. It's a basis, but I'm not sure it's enough. And it can be, for example, PDF, and then the liquid file, and then whatever any of us would share. And it's very boring, but I managed after, it took me a week, I would say, to get the files there for like super boring security course things. But now you can see I'm browsing the directory with a file, directory 1, file 2 in the directory 1. So again, super boring, but in terms of practically speaking, what does it mean? It means the book itself can be book plus liquid plus videos plus transcript of the video and everything. It's not there yet, but yeah, it's a step. But yeah, then that will be integrated in VR proper. Now to step back a bit, I mentioned it, I think, on Twitter, but the question that Brandel forced us to go through, and also when we discussed by email about what it is to read, with a very nice indie description in 4 or 5 paragraphs with the different steps. Reading is more than just like parsing a paragraph or dozens of paragraphs. And it prompted me. I was discussing with this researcher 10 or 15 years ago, because a friend of mine told him that I had a process on how I read, or I read, as an explicit diagram. And this guy contacted me because it was the subject of his research, which in French they called lecture savante, which is how one read a document that is not a story, basically. And again, not going from A to B. And why do I say this? Is because I think this kind of research on what it means to actually read should help us to highlight the kind of quote unquote magical interaction that we're looking for, because we don't just read, and when we read from A to B, maybe VR itself is not necessarily the most interesting medium. So that was an idea a couple of days ago. Now I have some references. I contacted him, and I'll chat with him eventually. But I think the reading itself, we don't want to read in VR. When we say things like this, we make quite a few assumptions. So I think deconstructing, and based on past and current research, what reading actually is more interesting than our own speculations. So yeah, that's the path, let's say, I would take there. And I gave a link and an example on wasting paper for thinking, and past ideas like this, that I think we should waste pixels also for thinking in VR and AR. Yes, and to look back also, same on the prototyping and reading this paper with a different way to read it. Yeah, it loops back a bit to what I did or what I show here in the group a couple of weeks ago, which is the normal text, potentially notes related to it, an augmented summary, a search to past notes in it. So basically augmented some kind of reading view, and then that's part of the formalization in research of this kind of, let's say, deeper reading, or at least more structured reading. And again, that's what I think would be interesting to do potentially in VR, not the A to B one. And finally, I met this guy that I invited to the parliament, who makes this headset, which does VR and AR pass through, a bit like the Quest 2 or the Quest Pro. Why do I mention it? First, because it works, and I think that's pretty cool. That's an alternative to, for example, for Peter or for others who don't want to use a Meta account. That would be a solution, this headset. So it works. Why do I mention this? Is because I discussed with one of his engineers, because he also is interested in organizing text in VR, and he made this prototype a couple of months ago. I'll put a link also, because it's a 7 minutes video, but could be interesting to either discuss with him or have a demo, or but yes. And I think that's about it.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks for that. Now, further on my rant at a slightly different tone, how are we going to approach this? Are we going to, well, definitely everybody's welcome to do their own experiments, no question. But are we also going to try to build something together? That may not be feasible. That's why I'm asking. Or should we try to do different things and comment on what different people are doing? Because obviously we all agree that the ultimate outcome would be to learn something that is generalizable, not just a CD-ROM of the book, so to speak, right?
Yeah. So I mean, my reluctance to commit to building something before knowing what is worth building is that if I look back at some of the more bullish things that people have kind of thrown into the space in the form of things like Google Cardboard and other people's kind of proclamations and announcements of absolute success, I really feel like I've done more harm than good. And I don't necessarily know that that it serves to be purely selfish. My purpose is to get an even wider group of people aware of or thinking about text than this court here right now, until we have some of those answers, until we have some things that we can really hand on heart say, this makes it better, you know. And you know, I think that I'm super pleased to have you guys on this journey. It was my goal to after last year's Future of Text to say these are some people I think would be able to see the importance of virtual reality, the importance of being able to take a really hard look at the current state of technology, say we can do better, we can involve more space, we can involve more actions, but you know, especially if you look at how badly Meta is doing in the popular press right now, and we'll see, you know, next week once everybody gets these headsets, whether the story changes and they can go, oh, actually no, you know, productivity in VR is really amazing, everybody's worked it out, that's cool. You know, if it turns out that the fruit is more low hanging than that, then you know, of course we can throw things into a document. We can make a reading in VR. My concern, my fear, and it really is a fear, is that we just don't, you know, to Vince's skepticism, we don't have something that's worth putting in front of people yet. We don't have a real sort of sales case, and in fact, asking for more attention at a time when you haven't sort of really got a reasonable answer to that can legitimately do a medium and effort toward it more harm than good. That's where I am, and so that's why I'm in search of what's good more than what can we show.
Okay, so I am not trying to get a bigger audience. That's an important point you raised. What I am trying to do is deadlines make things happen. Is an expression that I really think is important.
Yeah, agreed.
There are so many different things we can do, and we should. Now, I just want to walk you through what I've done that no one's looked at. Ha ha ha. Okay? Because there is.
It's amazing. I'm so thrilled that you're doing it.
It is amazing. It truly is, because I am not amazing in this. This really highlights that anybody can do it and should do it. Mark, and right? That's amazing. So the very first page here, and this is fired for many reasons, but I just put a 2-page spread at a good reading angle, and it's okay. Right? This is not going to be on the front page of the New York Times, you know, revelation in VR. But I think this includes the stuff we have to look at. I think Bob was shaking his head a little bit about my prosaicness earlier. He might not have been, it doesn't matter, but he seemed like he was. Point is that for at least one of the things we're doing, there has to be a basic reading experience. And early in this conversation, I can't remember if you were here, Brandel, I put on immersed. I went to author, made the type in author really, really small, and made the screen really, really big. And the text was fantastic, as in it didn't degrade further. So that was useful from that side of it. So here, experimenting with foreground, background. And I found that this big map thing, it's okay, but there are things that would have to be done for it to relate. This is more interesting, where let's say we have pictures, they can appear somehow, and being able to look at one large picture on the side was really pleasant and useful. But first of all, how do you make the system know that there is a picture in here? You know, there are so many really boring questions that need to be answered. Here is having a table of contents, and you touch something, you get a full page preview of that thing. That was worth testing. This goes back to the thing that I presented today. Just make like a human scale origami book as one of the things. You know, I've invested a lot of thought into reader and author. So on the 2D level, some things are solved, but on the further level, absolutely not. But, you know, just here's experimenting with lowering the light by cheating, by having a glass around it. And this is something that I think is really boring looking, but having gone through tons of Photoshops, having the table of contents horizontal, showing however many pages you need is actually a really human readable way to deal with it. For some reason, it actually works. And it may disagree, which is great, but these are the things we have to test. Here, I leader scanned the room that I'm in. It's awful quality, but it adds something that is worth trying to understand. And here is just, you can click to go somewhere. This is what Fabian suggested. These are not all the pages of the book, but all the pages that have a level 1 heading. So it's kind of cool. It's a bit much, but below that, I cut them in half because most of the information seemed to be in the top half of the page. And as you notice, I moved it from being on the wall to being closer. Again, human scale. It's what I keep trying to drill into my own head, that it has to fit the person in there, not abstract. And then I did this. These are all the articles with the hard brackets around it, because as an idea, having a graph of all the articles is really cool. As an implementation here, is completely useless. It's just a mess. So then I thought, what about having a force that if you're looking at a table of contents, it has to be linear, even though, of course, you can read the book in any order. So you can have all the graphy things on the side, so at least you have something to hold on to. So that made a little bit of sense. Here I did it dark. Here it's a separate sheet, so we can see the different relationships. And here it is the notion of just having displays, and that's where I took Fabian's advice and did the cardboard cutout, which is in the other document that I sent, where I took my laptop screen and going wider. So I'm just showing this to bring things crashing down to earth a little bit.
That's phenomenal work. That's really, really cool. I'm not sure how you see that as crashing anything down.
No, not necessarily negative. I just mean that a problem with some people is that they're too intelligent, like Bjorn, right? He is like intelligent like you guys. He's just phenomenally more intelligent. Having a conversation with him for me is just like, what's going on here? But that often means that he goes, obviously has his work and he does that great. But when it comes to these kinds of discussions, it's like everywhere. So I'm just trying to say, if we all agree we're going to have a table for the book to be on, if we agree on a few basic things, then, even if Mark isn't comfortable right now because he has a neck issue to go into VR and play around, even if it's pen and paper, we have a shared literal thing, literal in all the senses of the word. And also, Peter, you have so many perspectives on virtual spaces that may then become more directly relevant to where we are right now. I mean, what you showed us today, Brandel, with all the devices next to each other, I think that is super, super important. Not to supplant the book, which of course you're not saying it would, but to be an element from that, and from the other things that we have, phenomenally important. But we just got to start somewhere. Sorry, repeating myself.
No, absolutely. On a purely mechanical level, I'm still not seeing that document as turning up. I'd love for other people to check. Frodo linked in the chat a Dropbox thing. I'm not able to get it. It turns up as an empty zip when I download it.
Okay. Let me do another thing. Hang on a second.
Cool. Mark, you're muted.
I know some of these cloud things don't like documents that are basically folders.
Yes,
I guess people started work on the tech before this other useful thing had come along, and so we're paying the consequence of it.
Yeah, you may need to zip it in order to share it properly in Dropbox. I'm not sure, but
I suspect that's probably what's needed.
No, it was zipped, but for some reason it's a 0-byte document. I'll have to go through versionings on different things. This is weird. Hang on. This is very odd. Yeah, the one there, that is 738 bytes. That's not very big.
no, that would be a very concise future of text. The item was deleted. Yeah. So, but yeah, I would love that. I would love it, especially once it works. I'll make a note of it to make sure that it's well labeled in my email. I get a lot of email, and so if another one has come through, then I may have missed it too. Yeah, no. So in terms of, sorry, go ahead.
Just a quick detail, it's just logistics, but I'll have to go soon. And also I'm taking a diving class for stress and rescue, which I warmly recommend, even if it's weird. But why do I mention this is because it's in the evening. So it means I'll see you in like 2 weeks or something. So I'll be via email or on Twitter and all, but for a while.
How are we going to possibly survive that?
I thought so, but yeah. Anyway, hopefully. Otherwise, I'll try to do stress and rescue remotely, but might be a bit challenging.
I need to tell you something. So my Quest Pro is arriving, I think, Wednesday, which is awesome. But I ordered 2 sets of stickers for it. One is round with our FTL logo to put on the side, but then on the top, hang on. Damn, I gotta find it. Let's see. It's gotta be this one. View order details. Nope. I'm getting closer.
But download's working for me, Freud.
Oh, it's working. Okay, good. Okay, just have a look at this. Yeah, this is a slightly earlier version, but I still have some changes to do, Brandel. The one that, so this is the sticker that's going to be on top of the headset.
That's fantastic.
So if you want, I've obviously ordered more than I need. I'm very happy to send to you.
And send a selfie too, please.
Well, it is going to change things, and yeah, it's all interesting. So yeah, okay, Fabian. So we'll stay in touch mostly via email and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this brings up a really. Wait, are you going the second?
Well, next minute.
Crying out loud, because this thing we just discussed, this bit here of when you click on a citation, you should be able to open the document you cited. You know, for the kind of thing that you're doing now, leaving us for a while, architecturally, we need something like that, right? I can build it on in my world, but Fabian, we need it on the web too and such, don't we?
So can the interaction would be to?
It's really simple. It's really simple. You cite one. Let's say you write a document. Peter reads it. He finds something interesting, copies it into a new document, exports it with Visual Meta. Both of these documents would have VMID because it's just a LaTeX kind of a hangover. So that means that if I read the document that cites the first one, I can click on that citation in the body text and see who it's citing, but also there's a link, not to a web server, but to open it on my own hard drive if I have that original document.
So that was the really simple part?
Yes.
Okay. So in theory, yes, I see both ways. One, the first with the link I shared on Twitter, where we stick it to 2D in the browser tabs, and then we add a bit of context to what that code snippet, which was the citation, was from. And the other is we just do a proper WebXR experience where we control everything, and thus we can, but text selection from there, I don't know how to do this in WebXR, like a per letter selection. It's somewhere in the to-do list, but it's not trivial. So the 2D part thing that I showed just earlier, where I read the PDF there, feasible, see how in WebXR proper, trickier, but can be if it's pre-selected text or let's say links, then it becomes trivial again.
Yeah, I mean, all this is in my world, which is very simple and traditional. I will assign reader to scan all the PDFs in a specific folder. So it'll have a little database of what's what. So if there is a citation that references one of these VM IDs and it knows that it's in this folder, it just opens it. Of course, doing it in other environments is more complicated, but that's the logic, because it's ridiculous that documents cannot directly relate to other documents, that has to go through the web. A normal citation, an academic citation, if you read it, you either get a link to go to a download page, or you go into your reference manager manually, find it and open it. You cannot link documents, and that's what we need to change.
On a local file system, it is possible to link to documents. It's just that it tends to be so explicit in terms of needing to know the absolute path. But yeah, I mean, the thing is that the web is a web of documents. Like that's what it is. And so at some level, like I sympathize, but I also think that like what you're lamenting is literally the definition of the web. but yeah, I do take your point that that a word editor is not a browser is perhaps that fewer things are browsers perhaps is the issue.
Well, the web is linked by servers, explicit servers. I think that documents should be linked by document. And of course, there are security issues. Someone can fake a document and all of that stuff, like you can fake other things. But if someone genuinely makes a document using this, because the VMID, it is, I see Mark correctly arguing with me in the chat here, but it's literally the day, the date, the time, the second, plus the beginning title of the document. That's what it is, the ID. So of course, if you make a new one, you've screwed that up. So, versioning becomes its other issue. But once you've shared it with your community, that will not change. So that just means it's there. So even if you're going to, you don't even have to be online, of course, which is really, really important. So I want to be able to send something to you guys. Fabian, who is somewhere else, he can write a piece, send back, and they're still connected. I think that is so important. We shouldn't have to have the internet on for that.
The hard part also is that there's there are almost two IDs you need. One is the original work, which often people have in completely different formats. So one of the things that the messy system that we have at the moment, one of the reasons it works is some people are working off a book, some people are working off a PDF, some are working off a printout, some people are working on a scan, all sorts of stuff. In one level, they're all the same thing. In another, certainly in the digital domain, they very much are not. And also on top of that, we want to capture the relation of my annotations versus yours in relation to the work that's represented by all those different media manifestations of that, which is why the tools aren't great at the moment. It's actually hard. And a lot of parts of that structure are actually remarkably lossy, and they're not persistent. So the concept is, I think, is really the concept is simple. The idea is really good. Whether we're even now quite there yet, I'm not entirely sure. And I don't say that to gainsay the idea. I'm just thinking we may be a bit over optimistic on delivering it in the very short term.
So in order to avoid that, my last words is an argument for the web. I'll just wish you take care, and I'll see you online and in those meetings too. Bye-bye.
Be safe.
Rescue.
Be safe.
You too.
Yeah, Mark.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump back a bit. Just think, I understand. I feel pain about the document, and I just want to say I don't think anyone's actually saying there's anything wrong with the future text. The interesting thing that is a challenge at the moment is that the future text content as we have it at the moment alone is not perhaps the ideal exemplar of all the things we want to show. So I think this isn't an either or thing. It's a both and. And indeed, one of the things I find really interesting about this is in a sense how much or indeed how little we can do with the book, which isn't, when little is not a bad thing. It's showing that, and this links to the point Brandel made about sort of early under delivery in a sense, is that Yeah, a lot of the things that are conceptually are quite easy are not necessarily there. So for instance, we can take a whole lot of things in our mind's eye, we pull the text apart, we get lots of things. These things turn out to not necessarily be interesting in the way we imagined.
Well, that's
So
the
one
whole
of the
point of it.
Right. So one of the both and points here is there are some other things floating around that we can use within this overall banner of the Augmenta, the Future of Text book, that don't necessarily have to be in the PDF, but can show how some of these things work in a way that's more immediately. I avoid the word compelling. One of the things you've asked for is people should look at this and go sort of, well, okay, or at least they should go, this is more than I thought it was going to be. And I think that's a genuine challenge.
It's even
just let me finish for a moment. It's important to make this point, and that is that one of the reasons I've been sort of umming and ahhing is despite all my commitment to this, I'm not finding the material we have the most compelling place to start from. And we have other things close to that we can put with it that don't in any way, shape or form devalue all the work and the contributions that have gone into the book. But if we put the book too much front and center, and we also get too tied into how easily it all comes immediately from author, then we lose by it.
Okay, right. I don't care. The reason I don't care is that your points are valid, no question about that. But I'm just saying, when the book comes out, it should be readable, even if it's a really simple thing in VR. So we've actually done some work on what we're talking about. Additionally, we have quite a few experiences that were created for the symposium that will be linked. Absolutely not throwing them away. If someone wants to do other things in the community, of course we will highlight that. I'm just saying, for a couple of weeks, we're almost there. Because the whole thing is, the only feeling, since you so very rightly asked the question, the only thing I want someone to do is turn 2 pages. Let's say that's the goal. And what I mean by pages, we don't even need to discuss. Maybe literal pages, maybe not, but they put on the headset, it's in front of them. I don't care what they say, but if they just go a little bit deeper into it because they're actually engaged with the content in this format, wow.
Okay, no, I get that. The sort of thing I was just alluding to is that the fact that we've got other things that we've done that are on the FTL site is not really what I was alluding to. What I meant was, when we talk about the sort of enhanced reading experience, it's having some exemplars of things that show that this is what we can do. This is what we can do at the moment. But what we get is the book, because it starts as a book. But what this hints at, in the way, if we had something that is not written in the way we write books now. So for instance, it's really interesting. I don't know if anyone else, Bob sent me one of his spreads from the, well, actually it was half a page, I think, from this, or it was done as 2 PDF pages. If it was sent as a laid up spread, would have been interesting, because they're actually in color, because they're out of the original Illustrator book. And one thing that's really jumped off the page to me immediately from that was, it didn't make it all look blocky and heavy, because of course this is 1980s typeface and everything, and it looks quite raw, and a lot of people will go, nah, it's not sexy enough, and because we just do that, we're so used to nice graphics. But actually I was fascinated by the fact that, so for instance, even just being able to use as an exemplar in a both and sense, say, so we could take the articles, we could deconstruct, we can sort of see the articles here. But just imagine what this sort of thing can do if you have this sort of content in it, because I think that's going to give people, more of a chance of saying, "Oh, right, okay," because they might say, even if it's not there now, this is something, and I can sort of see what it is. Otherwise, potentially what they do is they look at something, and they don't, because they don't have our understanding of.
But Mark, we're not trying to sell it to a wider audience. This is something Brandel said, and I agree with. This is not to go to market and get a lot of people into VR.
No, that's not what I'm saying, and I'm not saying that.
So what is it you are saying in terms of that?
So when somebody has the
experience
experience you described, that I don't think the content of the book alone is necessarily enough to give us
Yeah,
you know,
but-
to
but
make
Mark,
it seem like we've done all the work we have.
Yeah, but Mark, I don't care because that is our
Fine,
vote.
you don't care, but I'm still.
No.
But that's fine that you don't
Mark,
care. Let's leave it at that.
For the 9th of December, okay, on
Yeah.
the 9th of December, we're publishing our book, right? If the content isn't exciting enough, I don't care. Not meaning it's shit or whatever.
No.
Everything you're saying is absolutely valid. I'm just saying that we have X content. We're presenting it on Y day. We should make it as readable as possible. That's it.
Yeah. So
Of
what
course.
I mean, the useful thing is actually now I've got the document, because in fact the place I would start from is not the book. What I actually want to see is the data. I actually want to see the articles. I want to see, because just one of the things that flame past here. Okay, so if we did an analysis of the text, that's fine. But does that just give us numbers from which we're
Okay, all right.
No.
It's an important question, but whether we look at an analysis or not, or a GPT.
No, you're wrong end of the stick. You've grasped completely the wrong end of the stick of what I say, which is just that if we look at the content, rather than it's in its PDF form, we just say, okay, so we got this number of articles, we've got this. What apart from doing visual display things in an enhanced medium, what more do we get out of it? And that would be easier to do with that. And I must get round to. I'll see if I can give David LeBeau a ring and see if we can get his keywords for the first 2 volumes of text, because that could potentially be interesting. I know we obviously won't have them for the 3rd, but it helps us make something. It helps us deliver on what you want to do, because otherwise we're stuck in a visual first approach.
No, we're not stuck in a visual first approach, because we've always had access to the underlying textual data. It is in a .liquid, it's got the JSON, it's all there. I am not at all saying we have to have a PDF in space. That is not what I'm saying when I talk about the book.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting you aren't.
No, but yes, you did actually suggest that. You're saying, you're talking about the data rather than, the book as it is. What we're, here's the thing, just do something. I'm channeling Fabienne here, just prototype something. If you think an aspect of the work should be presented in this or that way, just sketch it in some way, even if it's a paragraph of writing or pencil, because what I showed earlier took me a long time. It didn't take a lot of brain power. It isn't actually hard, but it taught me a lot of stuff that's hard to communicate, because a lot of it just doesn't work. All right.
Well,
it's like Brandel did this magic carpet, right? Of analyzing one of our text communications. How useful is it? These are the things. Now it's time to try to see where it is. Because, okay, let me just ask all 3 of you if you agree that the goal for the book on the 9th of December should be whoever's interested in the book, not in the audience, whoever's interested in the book, put on their headset and turn a few pages. Or do a few interactions because they actually want to look around. Is that enough of a goal, or should we have a bigger goal?
So just like you said in your presentation, I'm not interested in text in VR. I'm interested in understanding material in VR. And so I can tell you, I've only had it a few minutes, but I can tell you what I've been doing. I can show you what the way I've been sort of thinking about it. Where's my illustrator? Took the illustrator. Come on, where is it? Oh, there. Okay, just title should be bigger, I think. So looking at it, thinking, looks like give or take there's about 36 authors. So you might be able to do it with 2 spreads of 18, 2, 3 6s, and then possibly putting their some picture, some thumbnail that's representative of them, as well as their name, could be a useful thing to do, as well as I have only shared Illustrator, but yeah, I've got the future text and open in Author. I'm just gonna go through and sort of think about what it is that they actually have, and what are the relevant sort of. I know what I can do. So just screenshotting that and pulling it in here, like what we, just sort of thinking about what level of detail or what artifacts are relevant to be able to kind of be seen in these things. And possibly, something that I did recently for what do, maybe, oh, right, yeah, it's here. So what I did for what the prototype is I took all of the text, all of it, and put it in here like that. I don't know if I have a screenshot of when I put that into 3D. It wasn't very successful, but yeah, thinking about what kinds of things might be relevant to be able to kind of represent. And so either, mugshots, although they give you a handle to remember, but the relevance of what exactly Bob Stein looks like is less before you see its presentation. But unless you know him, maybe. And so I'm gonna go through all of the sort of the different things that we have, and try to play with that.
Yeah.
So out of interest, Brandel, where did you get all the authors from? Because I'm just looking at the document now. Most of it, I presume, has got to be forked out of Content RTFD.
So I actually just screenshotted. So you go Command plus, Command minus, and then I screenshotted that, and I didn't. So I think Frode is double counted.
Sure.
I think I did it. Fabien's double counted here. But yeah, like about 36 is the appropriate order of magnitude is what I was looking for.
No, and the next observation is, again, it's not in any way, shape, or form negative. It's just the reaction to looking at the data. Because now I'm looking at the various JSON bits, and I'm thinking, okay, so how would I get hold of all the authors, and how would I get hold of, so that it's partly something to see sort of how rich is it without having an interface getting in the way, because I suppose I've used too many things that have not quite delivered. And sometimes it's actually easier for me. I find it easier to do some of the visualization in my mind until I know what it is that I or somebody else can build. Because what often happens with the useful thing out of that stage is often I find is I've got completely the wrong data. I know what I'm trying to look at, but I have a set of example data that's either too clustered or too thin, that won't allow us to do something. And that's just what I was alluding to. And again, that observation, I know it sounds negative, but it's not. It just comes from the territory of doing this sort of work. And I've been doing this aspect, albeit not the visualization stuff, for a long time, like 20+ years. So this isn't a casual observation. And it's what I was driving at just when I was saying, so how can is there anything we can do to enhance this? Because I'm just so conscious of how easily people give up, because they start by saying, this doesn't excite me, I'll move on. And that's sad, because in a sense, it's not so much they should be excited, but I would hope we're certainly getting to the time in the calendar, sort of in the timeline now, where lots of people should be thinking, okay, this isn't going away. This is something that's coming. I may not be doing it, but what's happening now is going to affect me, which is something you've rightly pointed out, and I totally agree with.
But one of the things we need to get down to relatively soon, guys, is, well, first of all, Brandel, are you on your new monitor?
My new monitor, my studio display?
Yes.
It's at work.
Oh, because you look your image quality today is much better than before.
Oh, okay. It's same monitor. Maybe it's just using, I think I've updated my OS.
Oh, okay. It's a huge difference. Okay, so here's the thing. In the last few seconds of our call today, the stuff that you're all talking about is really all important, but we need to think of an interaction, a human interaction, not necessarily technical, of how to toggle between these views. Because ideally, that can be one of our innovations, right? In the document,
Yeah, I saw you. I like the ideas you had in the document.
I'm not sure if you've seen this one, Brandel, so I'm just going to share a quick second.
Do.
So just, prototyping using, have you seen this?
No.
Okay, so first one, to change the size of the monitor, because that's one of the things you want to do. Or by monitor, I mean the floating display of the book. I don't mean mimicking a laptop in this space. Just pull it by the sides. However, if you do this, then you can actually end up getting extra space on the sides, for instance. And then there's a question of what interactions to have to make something go up against the wall or whatever.
Uh-huh.
It'd be interesting if we all think about how to do that, because it should be really, really obvious for the user. I have to admit, I like the idea of starting with a PDF in VR. At least it looks like it. I'm not saying we have to end up like that. But start with something that is so simple and familiar to the user that it's completely and utterly unimpressive.
Yeah.
Once they're told one or two interactions, suddenly things grow in useful ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And coming up with a story of what people do would be wonderful. One of the things that occurs to me is that maybe facilitated by a visual meta or whatever other format, like having then the ability to kind of characterize your view and your sort of desired manipulations of it is a really important part of it. Watching Knowledge Navigator, you'd be surprised by how many people haven't seen Knowledge Navigator, but it's also, worth going back over to think about what it is and critically what it isn't. But yeah, like in terms of that sort of that elaboration and enunciation of what it is that the person desires out of the medium, I think that's a really valuable kind of point of reference, is to say, start with PDF. Then what do you want it to be? What is it? What are the ways that you want to read it in order to do that? One of the challenges is that with paper, all of the decisions that we make about how we're reading it are entirely sort of between eyes and brain, and very, very occasionally with a piece of paper, where you might even sort of cover stuff up. But mostly people poo-poo that to the point where people think that they're idiots for having to do that kind of thing, which is very unfortunate for those of us who require leaning on those kinds of things. But yeah, like I think coming from the because a PDF is fundamentally a sort of the most generalized, sort of the widest hedge of what it is that this information needs to live on versus what people intend to get out of it. So then, sort of picking a closer reading and sort of what consequent view and manipulation necessarily flows from that, I think would be really awesome.
There was a related thing, Brandel, to that. The thought that when you export as a PDF, all the first pages are stored, so they can act as a QR code. So when you open up a PDF in VR space, it can be you don't need to go to a visual meta at the back or anything. If you have that document, the system can go find the real thing, get the real data. Because a really beautiful story in this sense would be someone buys the book. I mean, if they buy a printed one, that's a problem. But anyway, they download the book. One of the first pages, it says, you can enjoy it in this medium. If you go here, this is the VR version as of the 9th of December 2022. Future versions will be somewhere else. They go in and it looks exactly the same. I just think that's such a magical thing. But then it would be really fantastic, of course, with gestures, but also if it says, okay, we are a team of loosely federated crazy people. Would you like Brandel's version of the book or Peter's version or Mark? There's nothing wrong with even having that level of choice, right? So it could be one beautiful origami sculpture, but it doesn't have to be.
An interesting thing that comes out of this is that so actually what the document, you're starting with basically a avatar of the document, which maybe something you can read, but what I'm taking from this really is that, in a sense, whether you can read it or not, like a book is almost neither here nor there. It's your link from the conceptual document or the document on your hard drive or wherever into this space. So that's almost the doorway into it, because at that point you might just read it as also, but what we here see is that that's probably the last thing you're going to do with it. You're actually going to do all this other stuff, some of which is yet to be built, but seem to be.
Yes, but I will also, just to be polar opposite of you, because that's fun. In the beginning of the chat today, Fabian showed reading in VR, and he did just normal, whatever's there browser, but he had an angle in the roof, so you could sit back in a chair, and here it is. I do actually feel that reading page by page in VR can be extremely pleasant. You know, it's like we've all been in our bed someday wanting to just close our eyes and have the text magically appear in front of us, right? We've all had that feeling. VR can actually do that once the headsets are not stupid. And I'm wondering about the Quest Pro, if that feels a little less too much on your face. Apparently it is much lighter on your head. Then even just plain reading will be better. That's not to be sniffed at, but plain reading with magic. So yeah, anyway, I appreciate today. It was very frustrating at times, of course, but we are getting somewhere, and we're trying to invent something entirely, completely, utterly new. And we're already running late because other people are beginning to think along these lines. Maybe not exactly what we do, but so looking at Twitter and stuff, it's easy to get diluted already. But it's got to be published with this year's date. So in 5 years, someone wants to look at what people thought about before real VR. Here we are.
Very quick one, Fred. This is a submission thing. Is that I've realised that the article I was writing really is long, if I was to cover everything. So I'm trying to get it down to 2 pages.
Don't.
I think that's what you want.
No. Write it as long as you want.
Okay, fine.
Looking at I built a single view of the contact sheet of the PDF. It's currently 511 pages.
Cool.
And I think that is what's great for, thank you for doing that, by the way. I think that's great because there are some morsels of brilliance in here, and there's a lot of dross. A lot of our conversations are dross, they really are. So if we can actually help people go through this actual piece of work, wonderful, right?
Yeah, I think a really interesting thing I'm already seeing in this is that, this is super, and this is obviously, in a sense, this is the first sensible thing to do, having got the thumbnails. And then I can immediately see one thing one can quite easily do with this is to smush them up in some way so the thumbnails that are effectively in an article, in a discrete part of this. Because again, this is actually somewhat unusual because it's a sort of journal. We keep talking about books, and books normally are one linear narrative, albeit in chapters and sections and things. So we've given ourselves an extra challenge here because there's this extra level of richness, and potentially a lot of extra information in terms of, we don't just have an author or one or two authors, we've got a boatload of authors. But no, this is really interesting. More pictures than before, which ironically sort of help because they become, we use these as a primary sense.
I actually think that the pictures makes it worse for exactly that point, Mark. Some of of course, it's great to have them when you're reading, no question. Absolutely, pictures and diagrams are brilliant. But when it comes to kind of thumbnail, if someone writes a really deep thought that they think is incredibly important, all they can do is really bold it. It would be nice if they could make it like poster size. This is my key message.
Yeah. Well, again, going back to the point with the discussion we were having earlier about, where we are and where what I envisage this becoming for exactly the reason you say, because you look at all those things, wow, okay, there are, I don't know, 100 whatever thumbnails with squiggly bits of text on it. Which are the interesting ones? Well, you can't tell by looking. But if you were having a thing where you were effectively drilling down to that and maybe getting just say the first page or something, if what we've been talking about in terms of people beginning to use more structured writing for this sort of informative writing, not for writing novels, comes to be a thing, then actually it does become more important, because if you increase the granularity of the thumbnail, the size of the artifact you're looking at, then actually you can begin to read some of it. Because other than that, what this becomes is basically like a visual index. So as it exists at the moment, and no, just like Randall, I think what I'm seeing is a visual index. You know, I
Yeah.
know that the thing with it, you know, the thing with the Comic-Con is page 92, which is interesting, but you know, kind of not what we're going for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is where it obviously is very exciting, because seeing a view like this should definitely be one of the options. You know, the wall, and then you should, you know, the interactions become interesting. Can you just grab a page and start reading, and suddenly you're in reading mode? You know, all these things. Once this becomes concrete, you know, that's what becomes possible to test.
Yeah. I mean, a side project, I think, not to do now because, you know, we have enough going on, but something I've stuck in the back of my mind is to get hold of some or all of Bob's spreads for this, which I now know are in color when you get them out of the original. Sorry.
Oh, amazing.
This one. And basically get those as a series of literally 2-up pictures, because the trouble with a paperback is if I really open it, I will wreck the 1980s glue on it. And it actually has quasi links on it. It's quite an interesting one to play with, because a bit like Hypertext Hands-On, this is at a time when people, you know, Hypertext was much newer, but there are things, you know, arrow, go to page 46. And there's something to play with there, but I find what an interesting, again, this will be a different experiment, but something interesting to do with that is the ability to take something that was designed to be used in a format that you can sort of do by opening the book, but actually having something literally like a mini poster, call it what you will, in front of you, and actually being able to follow the author's intended links between it would be quite interesting. Not least of which, because this is something that was written in 1989.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
By the way, the reason I'm showing you Edgar here, this week has been really, really good. Half term starts today. And as a prize, he was allowed to start using this website, which is all kinds of physics games and stuff.
Oh, neat.
But it's just to make explicit my approval of interactions, diagrams, and all that good stuff. But you know, I'm just have to hold the candle for the normal content we have in the book as well.
Yeah.
Oh no, here he is wearing his full uniform. So cute. Had to share accidentally. Oh no.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There are many things we can do, and I mean, Peter, for instance, with your library focus, I would really like to see some of that spelt out more literally. I did get the book, the hypertext book. I'm looking through it with the one you've been talking about. And, you know, same with you, Mark. If we end up with vastly different views of what the book should be, what could be better? Even if some of them are not decoded.
I don't actually think we have vastly different views, to be honest.
No, but if we manage to do that, right, that would be a goal.
Yeah.
Right? That would be just beautiful, because it is so bizarrely different. I mean, one thing that, you know, Fabian really pushed me to, now I'm going to start using the Quest for Author. So that means I first have to buy the Apple keyboard, the separate one, because doing it with the laptop is a bit weird. But
well, you're going to get one of these. Well, you probably won't get the big one, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll try to get the small one. I don't need numerics.
I like number keys.
Well, I really like the trackpad below the keyboard, because I can do this to do trackpad and type.
Yeah.
That is bizarre to me, and I've never liked the mouse, which is ironic, obviously. But Brandel, when you do some of the typing in VR, which keyboard do you use? Or do you not do that?
Typing. I don't really type in VR.
Actually, you know what?
I haven't really.
I'm just going to stick with this keyboard. But anyway, yeah, go on.
Yeah, I haven't really done too much. I do have I've got a Bluetooth keyboard. It's a Windows one, and I plugged it into I've connected it to my Quest before. There are other Bluetooth keyboards that are available. They're cheaper than Apple's ones, but yeah, if you want to use an Apple one, then they're a good bet. You know, the little Magic keyboard.
I have a question/request for you, Brandel, and that is to talk to your Apple buddies about one weird thing, and that is in the view system setting, the monitors, to allow the user to have an arbitrarily shaped monitor for virtual use. Because I would really like a tall one.
Hmm. Yeah, you can set. So I've got a BenQ monitor here, and you can set it to be portrait. And it's weird and fun, certainly. Yeah, I can take a photo of it if you like. It's
Yeah, I
pretty
know the
cool.
ones. What you mean? You can rotate the whole. Those are the ones you can rotate.
And Mac OS will pick it up. Well,
Yeah, yeah,
Mac,
yeah.
Mac OS does not pick up that this one does, but
Right.
The Pro Display does. But nobody's asking you to drop what 7,000 pounds on that. But yeah, it does it. And I believe you can probably even mount the studio display sideways too. But yeah, the BenQ is good. It has a pivotable handle and actually allows you to rotate it.
I just want a virtual
Portrait
one.
ones will notice when you've done it. But
I
sorry?
just want a virtual one. I want to be able to sit down with my laptop and then, woo!
Oh, you don't mean you mean if Apple were to be producing something in the future, you would want to be able to do that.
No. What I mean is even simpler. See, that's the problem. You're too clever. You know too many things. Peter, that's your link there, which is so cool. No, I mean here in displays, right? So if I run immersed, I have, where'd it go? There's some kind of an option somewhere to make fake monitors. So I can have monitors around, right? So I want to be able to add a software monitor that's not a real monitor, but if I use a headset, then I can say that I want it to be 2 feet tall or whatever. So in the
Oh,
virtual headset,
fascinating.
yeah.
Interesting. No, I'm not familiar with that. That's really interesting. That's a great question. Yeah, I'll have to look at that.
Make it happen, man. Make it happen. You're in California, just knock on doors.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because similarly, actually, that what that plays. Once you have a soft monitor, you can actually have something that maybe something's prime monitor. Not in. I don't mean in the way of the slightly bendy desktop things you get now, but something basically that's designed so you're sitting at your desk and without having to do a lot of physical movement, you can basically address quite a bit of space, which would be another useful way. Because if the virtual monitor is at a comfortable distance for your reading, again, it's just one of the things you may do. It's not what everyone would use for every task, but that sort of thing strikes me becomes possible once you take the concept effectively of a virtual display space.
So
yeah, absolutely.
one thing I'm going to start testing on Wednesday is the blended AR type view. We're using a view, an immersed view of my laptop, overlaid my real laptop, right? Mm-hmm. So it's in the view, and then I can start playing with this, with the sizing there. But I really can see an Apple commercial or whatever headset that starts like this. And then the things that you add isn't just another display, but you add knowledge from this in different parts of the room you're working on. Like imagine the prototyping, just to take that 3D model that you made, putting that over here. That kind of stuff is so compelling.
Yeah.
Right, but we have a lot of infrastructure has to be done by that. So when you move it over here, what does that mean? Here related to what? Is it related to the screen or to the table? Those are crucial things, because I notice, probably like you, when I read or write, I often lean my elbows on the table. So if the virtual table doesn't match the real table, that's not useful. So, there are so many actual use thing that comes into it that's really fascinating. And I do think that the most compelling AR, VR reading things will be really simple. We just have to go all over the map to find them.
Well, I'm now imagining the Windows version will say, did you mean to put your elbows on the table? Click yes, no.
No, that's called having a 5-year-old son who's going to a very well brought up school where he actually says that. Dada, you cannot sit like that. So yes, Clippy Edgar. Right, you're all wonderful. I'm extremely grateful. I look forward to Monday. I will keep thinking, of course, about this. And truly inventing is hard.
Sure.
It is. I'm so impressed with the photograph and paper prototyping you've been doing. I think it's incredibly instructive and it will fare you well for thinking with it.
It only
Have a
took
good
about
weekend.
9 months of pushing.
You see how valuable it is, though, even without, like you say, without particularly elaborate sort of 3D manipulation skills, to just jam some junk in a space and go like, oh, okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's and also now that I found out that author in immersed, when I make the text really small and the display massive, the text stays fine. That's a really interesting observation, because now I have a thin column of text. That means I have 2 large spaces on either side that I can actually use. But what I cannot do is make the map text smaller. It's just not a function yet, and Jacob may or may not have time. So I would like to have it really, really small, just to see if it feels right or not. These are the things we have to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Did you, Brandel, see the suggested date for the demo day?
No.
15th of April.
15th of April. Cool. Okay.
PR or in person, we'll see what happens.
Mhm.
All right, guys, we're at 2.2 hours, so that's all lovely. Have a wonderful weekend.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
See you, everybody.